Ladies and gentlemen, before we begin, I would like to remind the audience that at any point during the program, if you have any questions, please post them at the Q&A box during the Q&A session. The event will start shortly. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, a very good day to everyone for joining us here today. To Academician Professor Emerita Tan Sri Dr. Mazlan Othman, the co-chair of International Conference on Tropical Sciences, TropSc 2024, Professor Dr. Ahmad Ismail, the chair of the Tropical Natural Resources Track, TropSc 2024, senior fellows, fellows of the Academy, members of Young Scientists Network, Academy of Sciences Malaysia, YSN ASM, the Academy's partners and affiliates, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to our second pre-conference webinar, part of the Future Belongs to the Tropics webinar series. This webinar series celebrates the tropics and highlights the importance of science and technology in the region. Additionally, it serves as a lead-up to International Conference on Tropical Sciences, TropSc, which the Mahathir Science Award Foundation and the Academy of Sciences of Malaysia will jointly host in July 2024. Today's webinar is a joint effort between the Mahathir Science Award Foundation and the Academy of Sciences Malaysia, where we are celebrating World Ocean Day theme, putting oceans first, focusing on the tropics. Now, before we begin, I would like to invite the co-chair of our upcoming International Conference on Tropical Sciences, TropSc 2024, Academician Professor Emerita Tan Sri Dr. Mazlan Othman, to give her opening remarks.
Ladies and gentlemen, esteemed guests, good day to all of you. Welcome to our second TropSc 2024 pre-conference webinar series. This time, we are celebrating World Ocean Day with the theme, Putting Oceans First. And as usual, we will focus on the tropics. The world's tropical oceans have special ecosystems and biodiversity, and these remarkable ecosystems face unprecedented challenges. Rising temperatures, plastic pollution, overfishing, and habitat destruction, they all threaten the delicate balance that sustains marine life. How should these issues be addressed? Our speakers today will present their perspectives. I'm also pleased to see that apart from these conservation issues, we will also cover the blue economy, as well as the potential for generating alternative energy. Two very important issues, particularly for the tropics. I was looking for a quotation on the ocean, and I found one, which I think I will share with you. And it goes like this. With every drop of water you drink, every breath you take, you are connected to the sea, no matter where on earth you live. Happy World Ocean Day.
Thank you very much to Tan Sri Dr. Mazlan Othman for the wonderful speech. Next, please welcome Professor Dr. Ahmad Ismail, the chair of the Tropical Natural Resources Track, TropSc 2024, to give his welcoming remarks.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. It is with great pleasure and excitement that I welcome all of you to our second Tropics Science 2024 pre-conference webinar series under the Tropical Natural Resources Track. Under this track, Future webinars include the International Day for the Conservation of Mangrove Ecosystem in July and World Cocoa Day in December. Today, we are celebrating World Ocean Day. Under the theme of Putting Ocean First with the topic Empowering the Marine Life Conservation in the Tropics. As you may already know, the ocean covers over 70% of our planet's surface, providing us with invaluable resources, regulating our climate, and sustaining a diverse area of life. From the tiniest phytoplankton to the magnificent of blue whales, the ocean harbors a wealth of beauty and wonder that we must strive to protect and preserve for generations to come. World Ocean Day serves as a reminder of our responsibility as caretaker of these precious resources. It is a call to action, urging us to join hands and work together towards safeguarding the health and well-being of our ocean. Today, we have a privilege of hearing from distinguished experts, scientists, and environmentalists who have dedicated their lives to understanding and protecting our ocean. Their insights and knowledge will enlighten us and inspire us to take meaningful action. Together, we can make a difference. Let us foster an environment of collaboration, innovation, and collective responsibility as we tackle the challenges facing our ocean. Once again, I extend my warmest welcome to all of you. May this webinar on Ocean Day, World Ocean Day, be a source of inspiration and motivation, and let's embark on this journey together, protect and restore our ocean. Thank you.
Thank you very much to Professor Dr. Ahmad Ismail for the insightful speech. Now, ladies and gentlemen, before I invite our moderator, Ms. Cheryl Rita Kaur, to take over, please allow me to introduce a bit about her. Ms. Cheryl Rita is a research analyst at the Maritime Institute of Malaysia, MIMA, a national government policy research institute looking into matters related to Malaysia's interest in sea and a national focal point for research in the maritime sector. She specializes in marine environmental or resource management, ocean governance, marine pollution, and green maritime industry practices. Now, without further ado, I would like to invite Ms. Cheryl to dive into the session. Please welcome.
Thank you very much indeed, Ms. Nani, for the kind introduction. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests and participants from around the world, welcome to our World Oceans Day webinar on marine life conservation in the tropics. I am Cheryl Rita, and it is my great pleasure to be your moderator for this important discussion today. We gather here to celebrate the ocean and its importance while focusing on the inspiring action and conservation efforts to protect the ocean and sustainably use marine resources, especially as mentioned in tropical regions. Before we deep dive into the fascinating world of marine life conservation, let us take a moment to reflect on the significance of our oceans itself. As mentioned in the opening speeches, especially by Professor Ahmad, our oceans cover more than 70% of the Earth's surface and play a vital role in supporting biodiversity, regulating our climate, and providing livelihoods for millions of people. The tropics, in particular, host some of the most diverse and fragile marine ecosystems on the planet. Accordingly, and best suited, the theme of this year's United Nations World Oceans Day is Planet Ocean, Tides Are Changing. The ocean is starting to get more attention, and fortunately, things are starting to change to a more positive direction. We can assume so. The ocean was formally mentioned in the Paris Climate Agreement of 2015. However, it was only in 2019 that an ocean and climate change dialogue became part of the UN Climate COP process. Besides climate change, as mentioned also in the opening just now, we also hearing about the importance of the sea on various other fronts, plastic pollution, blue economy, climate regulation, ecosystem services, and so on. But alongside all that, there is a detectable assumption that the sea is available space to expand into. We'll fill up most of our land with our buildings, infrastructure, and agriculture, and just look at the vast expanse of water waiting for humans to give it a purpose, if I may say so. Hence, the ever more importance we have now to place blue economy and sustainable development discussions, which we will explore further in this session today. Considering all this, ladies and gentlemen, the objective of this webinar is to bring together experts, scientists, conservationists, and stakeholders to discuss marine life conservation in tropical regions, together with the issue of climate change and the blue economy. Through our engagement today, we aim to share knowledge, raise awareness, and inspire action towards sustainable practices and policies for the protection of marine life in the tropics. Now, without further ado, it is my pleasure indeed to introduce to you our esteemed panel of speakers who are indeed colleagues and friends, familiar faces, who I'm really delighted to moderate today. And their wealth of knowledge and experience in the field of marine conservation is going to be valuable to our discussion in celebration of the Oceans Day today. Their expertise will provide valuable insights into the challenges and opportunities associated with protecting marine life in the tropics. So, ladies and gentlemen, esteemed speakers, each of you will be given 10 to 15 minutes. I hope you can try to keep it within maximum 15 minutes to present. And we hope to allocate a bit more time for the participants to ask questions later at the end of the session. May I also advise the speakers who are speaking only to leave on your camera, and the rest of us will just switch it off later. And you will be able to see the timer on your screen so that you can manage your presentations accordingly. Without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, let me quickly introduce to you our first speaker, Mr. Victor Charlie Andin, who is the Interim Manager, Marine Footprint at WWF Malaysia. He will be speaking on maritime conservation in the tropics. Victor, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Ms. Carol. All right. Good morning, Ms. Carol, the honorable speakers, to the organizing committee, and to everyone joining this session this morning. It is truly an honor to be part of this event today, and also a humbly experience to be among distinguished speakers who are truly experts in their respective field. I would also like to take this time to thank the Mahathir Science Award Foundation and also to Academy Science Malaysia for giving myself and WWF this opportunity to share and to take part of today's event. This morning, I will be talking about marine conservation based on experience and lesson learned in our many years of work in WWF Malaysia. All right, so before I move further into the topic, I would like to allow me to be given a brief introduction to WWF Malaysia. So WWF Malaysia is part of the Worldwide Fund for Nature, which is the international conservation organization. The organization started in 1961, while WWF Malaysia was established in 1972. And yes, we have just celebrated our 50th anniversary last year. We are the largest conservation organization in the world, having presence in over 100 countries and 5 continents. We have over 5,000 plus staff worldwide and over 5 million supporters. Our vision for marine conservation program is for a sustainable developed Malaysia, a marine ecosystem that upholds the integrity and resilience of the globally significant marine biodiversity and marine resources by the year 2050. So at the national level, we have various projects in almost all the states in Malaysia. Our area of work includes species conservation, habitat protection, community empowerment, and sustainable seafood production and consumption. Scope of our initiative and works cover both project-specific and also area-specific. right? So within the marine program, there is 6 conservation targets that has been identified and put into focus. And this includes the iconic local tropical marine species or habitats such as the sea turtles, Irrawaddy dolphins, reef fishes, and also coral reef. The conservation targets are susceptible to various impacts and threats that are both human and non-human induced, directly in and indirectly. Although some threats are unique to specific targets, we have identified one common threat that has an impact across all targets, which is climate change. So these are one of the topics that I really want to dive into this morning. And I believe this is some of the topics that is being highlighted as mentioned by Ms. Carol, I believe by all the speakers this morning. All right, United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change defines climate change as a change of climate which is attributed directly or indirectly to human activity that alters the composition of the global atmosphere and which is in addition to natural climate variability observed over comparable times and periods. So the effect of climate change, even within the country, is conspicuous, right? So according to several studies, since the temperature of nesting beach sands influence the sex ratio of turtle offspring during incubation, warming climate can potentially drive sea turtle into extinction by creating a shortage of male. So it does have negative impacts towards targeted species, even within the tropics. Climate change affects fish and their habitat. Warmer temperatures influence the abundance, migratory patterns, and mortality rates of wild fish stocks. And in fact, they will have negative impacts, especially on artisanal fishes, even within the country. Furthermore, coral bleaching has been much attributed to the warming of seawater. A change in water temperature as little as 1 degree Celsius can cause coral to drive out algae, resulting in coral bleaching. And on top of this, drought, flood, storms, or even extreme heat damage infrastructures, causing not just loss of livelihood, but even human life. What is most alarming in my opinion, is that the level of awareness among people most vulnerable to climate change impact is really low, resulting in insufficient to almost no adaptation measure taken to combat climate change impact. So climate change is not an emerging issue. It is a now issue that needs the attention of all parties. Understanding it better will help to develop mechanisms for adaptation while also working on mitigation efforts to reduce and prevent emission of greenhouse gas that causes it. So effective conservation is measured by impacts of the effort to the population health of the conservation target. Conventional approach to conservation has always been too focused on a species or a site-specific effort. However, when we zoom out, we realize that there are other threats as well, directly or indirectly impacts the target, which could eventually deem the initial effort fertile. So, yeah, instead, to improve the effectiveness and conservation effort, we should look instead into a more holistic and systemic approach to address the threats by implementing various initiatives within one particular seascape or area, thus creating better impact to conservation target and a more positive ecosystem for people as well as for nature. So we believe that effective conservation must have positive impact, not just to the environment, but also to the well-being and the local inhabitants, to the economy. So this approach requires collaboration, and it should be inclusive as well to all stakeholders within the landscape or a seascape, right? So this is how we believe that marine conservation should be looking forward to a more holistic, to a more systemic kind of approach, not just targeting the specific species, for example, in this illustration, sea turtle, but also to the industry that is affecting it, to the activities or other areas within that seascape that is also influencing the target species. So such systemic approach, we believe, will have better impact and will be much more effective in terms of conserving the targeted species. Right, marine conservation has evolved over the years from being a species or site-specific projects to implementing a sustainable social economic approach for community, taking a systemic approach at a landscape level, introducing nature-based solution for the industry, sustainable blue economy, and more. So our marine conservation, for example, we started in 1972 with works on marine conservation areas, has since expanded into other areas as well. We have since started to work on sustainable aquaculture, sustainable fishery, and even a circular economy within our line of work. All right, so this advancement does create opportunities for collaboration between the authorities, industry players, communities, research agencies, and so on and so forth. So collaboration is a value that we hold highly in the organization, and we believe through partnership and collaboration, impacts can be created. And lastly, there is space to innovate as well in the marine conservation. The usage of technologies, robotics, artificial intelligence, modern approaches and tools should be utilized to help improve the effectiveness of marine conservation with the optimum resource that we have now. So this is the end of my really short sharing. So I end this sharing with this really short and also popular phrase that we always use, which is together possible. And I hope this session has been really informative, okay? And more importantly, I hope this session helped to ignite interest towards more collaboration for a better ocean for people and nature. For only together it is possible. For only together we can achieve better impacts and towards a better and healthier ocean for everyone. So I thank you everyone for listening, and I pass this time back to Ms. Carol. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Victor, for the very informative and encouraging presentation. And thank you also for keeping to the time allocated to you. We appreciate that. So ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Victor has highlighted a couple of very important factors that we should take into consideration. One is thank you for highlighting the wonderful work that WWF has been doing in Malaysia and also in the region. He also highlighted the 6 priority conservation targets and threats that they face, and how climate change is a common denominator in all this. The systemic approach definitely is something that we should be considering, as well as the opportunities to collaborate, work together, and consider technology when we do so. So Mr. Victor, with that, thank you once again, and please do stay on with us because we'll keep the questions to the end of the session. Dear participants, as mentioned by the MC earlier, please do use the Q&A function on your screen to pose any questions that you may have for the speakers, and we'll take it up from there at the end of the session. So without further ado, let me now move on to the next speaker. The esteemed speaker we have with us, Professor Dato Dr. Nuraini binti Haji Mokhtar. She is the Distinguished Fellow at the Maritime Institute of Malaysia, as well as ENOS at University Malaysia Terengganu. Professor Dato Nuraini is also on the UN Decade Advisory Board, IOC UNESCO. It is indeed a pleasure to hear from Professor Dato Nuraini on her topic, Marine Life Conservation Policy in Putting Oceans First. With that, Dato, I pass the floor to you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Cheryl. First, I would like to express my sincere thanks to the organizers, Academy Science Malaysia, and for giving me this opportunity to share my thoughts on the topic. I would like to start with the topic given to me in conjunction with the World Ocean Day today, everyone. The topic is Marine Life Conservation Policy in Putting the Oceans First. So, to the Tan Sri Mazlan, Prof. Ahmad, thank you for having me here also to actually trying to frame in terms of the efforts of the elements of the conference and the Trop Science, the future belongs to the tropics. I hope it be useful. So why putting the oceans first? When we discuss about marine conservation, so you need to understand the role of ocean, the significance of it, and how the management of the coastal ecosystem is very important. First, the ocean is actually at the tipping point. We realized, and we heard, we read, we noticed that if our actions over the next 3 to 10 years will actually determine the state of the ocean for the next 10 years. This quote was given by C.V. Earle, one of the lady mother of the ocean at the global level. So the ocean is the earth, the first life support of supply of 50 to 70% of oxygen. It's the first source of protein to feed billions of people. And we realize that the ocean regulates our climate in the context of the climate change. It's really the part of the parameter, the denominator as mentioned by Cheryl. It absorbs CO2, it holds 97% of the Earth's water, and support the greatest abundance of the life on the planet. And then more than 60% of the world's population also lives near the coast. In the nutshell, the ocean provides livelihood, recreation, beauty, wonder, untapped scientific discoveries, leading to new medications, food, and advanced technologies. Everyone, everywhere depends on a healthy sea. Human activities drive climate change and ocean environment degradation. And we realize if we don't do anything, the degradation will also lead to the habitat loss. I would like to share, as a partner WWF, as mentioned by Victor just now, they are our partner in terms of the conservation. So in understanding about the elements of climate change, actually driver of the change from the human interventions and human activities. And the nature laws drive us to climate change. So again, let us remind ourselves, we go back to nature. We need to look into the nature-based solutions, and we, the people, the only ones who can protect and restore the nature. If we look into the aspect of biodiversity, there are 3 levels of biodiversity, which means ecosystem, species-based, as well as genetic biodiversity. But in the context of the global world, we talk about global biodiversity. But how can we manage the ocean and the complex coastal environment, it has to be done in an integrated manner using ecosystem-based systems and interventions tailored to the local needs and conditions. It's not the same. But overall, as you can see in the picture, from the oceans, we have all other challenges in terms of illegal, unregulated, unreported fishing or RUU. We have also threats to the marine ecosystem due to the pollution, the disposal from the waste from the land. What happened to on land that actually the ocean becomes the sink. The source is on land, and the sea has to absorb all the anthropogenic substances that we have. So waste management, in the context of circular economy, blue economy, we believe that this webinar is very important for us, for all of us to look into perspective and framing our thoughts and understand the interlinkages between what happened on land and what's going into the sea, and how are we going to address and provide solutions innovatively. So in the context of blue economy and the values, we have the asset base over USD 24 trillion for the future if we were to look into the fishing, aquaculture, shipping, tourism, and we have more than USD 8 billion for coral reef, especially nations like Malaysia. The 50% of life on the earth, as we see, there are a lot of species and flora, wild animals that need to be conserved. And there are some in terms of economic activities for the food and trade and energy, transportation. For Malaysia, we realize the fact that the port management and the policy related to the navigation, safe navigation, security is very important to the top leading routes, especially surrounding Malaysia. So I would like to go beyond that, as we believe in the topic today for the tropical science. Malaysia being the education hub and eco-tourism destination, as well as the 3 top world biodiversity centers in the tropics. And initiative like the Coral Triangle Initiative for Fisheries and Food Security will determine and will be the essence of my discussion today. The blue ocean service sector, because we need to have the growth of ocean economy, which increase from the demand of the ocean scientific research and the operation. So it requires the means to conduct ocean observation and measurements, be it manual, autonomous, which is the technology trends right now. So I believe in the context of the effort, the ocean that we want, as mentioned, the launch of the UN Ocean Science Decade in 2017, after UN mandated Intergovernmental Oceanographic Commission to start having these decade actions. So the Ocean Decade is a framework to identify, generate, and use critical ocean knowledge that is needed to reverse the cycle and decline of the ocean health and manage the ocean sustainably. We know about SDGs and SDG 14. So, but this is very focused in terms of decade activity, 2021, 2030, and we have left about 7 years more. There are efforts to have this join hands in terms of the activities or contribution. So from the acquiring of knowledge, as what the role of Academy Science Malaysia today, I believe you have a very significant contribution and role in terms of generating comprehensive knowledge and understanding of the ocean for our community and globally. So the increase of the ocean knowledge, including traditional knowledge, can, for all of us, join partnership with the other players, stakeholders, in the context of SDG 17, we have contributions for the resetting the ocean health. So I showed here the ocean we need for the future we want for the decade implementation plan. These are references that you can go under UNESCO or website. So there are 10 UN Ocean Decade Challenges with 7 outcomes. It kicked off about the Ocean Decade in terms of the result of the Global Ocean Science Report, where the current status of the oceans science in the world. Believe that with these challenges, on the 10 challenges, we are based on knowledge and solution challenges, essential infrastructure challenges, as well as foundational challenges, all circulate around sharing of knowledge and hoping to have this human relationship with the ocean as the outcome. At the end of the day, we believe that a clean, healthy, and resilient, productive, predicted, safe, accessible, inspiring, and engaging ocean by the end of the decade. So there are partners all over the world. These are initial partners that have contributed, meaning the government of Flanders, Sweden, Japan, Norway, China, Canada, Korea, and Kenya. But under the Intergovernmental Oceanographic Commission, there are 195 nations, maritime nations involved. I believe more to come. So under the call of decade actions, the first decade action concentrate on the trends, on the program that's leading to the SDG 14. First on the observations, predictions, modeling, and mapping. Then on multiple ocean stresses, deep sea and mesopelagic, coastal resilience, fisheries, culture values, and ocean literacy. These are main topics as over the years we're going to move on. So there are already call for number 5, and call number 4 was on blue economy. So let us come home and look at what we have in Malaysia, where we have the teaching and learning that we generate marine scientists, researchers, the seas around us, South China Sea, Malacca Strait, Sulu Sea, Celebes Sea. Do we understand? Do we know what we have? We know the climate and also the productivities. Are we affected during the time when there's coral bleaching? And we know that their scientists have enough funding to go and make measurements. So at the same time, we have the collaborations at the global world in terms of the Tropimundo, which is a master's program for marine ecosystem management. These are partners, and Institute of Oceanography and Environment of University Malaysia Terengganu has been doing this for UNESCO, for Ocean Teacher Academy. And we are a member of the International Oceanography Data and Information Exchange. We conduct scientific expeditions. In those days, it's a national expedition surrounding our waters, but we believe that we have more support in the future to have more cruise scientific endeavor in our Sabah waters as well. So in terms of the IOC regional leadership in Ocean Decade, we are part of the Western Pacific Group, the Group 4 under IOC. We are determined to have these decade action incubators, and sessions like this that we can actually create communications and engagement for the regional kickoff. Most importantly, we need to co-design the training of the early career ocean professionals for partnership with the Ocean Decade committees, with the right ministries, and we in Malaysia, and we create alliances with the universities, private sectors. So welcome the young scientists. We hope that with the understanding of the basic knowledge and also the biodiversity threat for our oceans, we can look into the future opportunities of concentrating science, integrating science and businesses for the community. So as science and users, you take research and operational and users to make use of the ocean data. The policy and users who are required to sustain ocean, but without data and information to support the policy is very difficult to actually determine as well as to support the cause for our concern for the public and users to share data and other activities, economic activities. So under SDG 14, we have the government organizations, non-government organizations, then intergovernment organizations. So it's a global movement. So here we are in Malaysia with many ministries dealing with the oceans. We have the partnerships for the policies as listed there. We are actually celebrating more than 40 years of UNCLOS, the UN Convention Law of the Sea. So today we are celebrating World Ocean Day. I believe the national policies has to be in place. So we have many policies related to biodiversity, and we need to look into the effort that has been done by the national bodies and agencies, as well as NGOs, then working together with international NGOs. So the main elements included the scientific knowledge, research capacity development, transfer of marine technology, the ocean health, marine biodiversity, marine affairs, marine pollution, including marine plastic pollution, ocean acidification, ecosystem management, fisheries management, marine protected areas, and blue economy. So at the end of the day, we had to go into the economic sense. What are the ecosystem services that ocean can provide? So previously, when I was at the National Oceanography Directorate, we have this draft of the ocean policy and the ocean data center, as well as the proposal to have the establishment of the National Oceanography Institute of Malaysia. So based, just like the UN Decade of Ocean Science, the rationale was coming from the State of Marine Environment report, the status of marine environment, the report that was done together, and we see that there are oceans of opportunity for Malaysia. So we had this vision previously, a healthy and productive ocean. This was in 2010. It was a decade, more than a decade ago. A healthy and productive ocean rich in biodiversity and heritage, wisely managed, safe and secure, and economically developed for equitable benefit of all now and the future. So we hope to have the development is a living document. We hope to have this blue ocean policy blueprint will actually incorporate and to be integrated what we had a decade ago in terms of the policy statement to transform the ocean sector by embracing inclusivity, sustainability, so that we have become a developed nation which is a good governance with the science, technology, and innovation. So there's national policy principles, I think I have listed there. The main important that is highlighted is conservation of biological diversity, so that we have this sustainability that can be achieved through the adoption of the whole of government approach. I stress that on the whole of government approach and ecosystem-based management approach. The institution should be streamlined to overcome the imbalances, the redundancies, inefficiencies, and the gaps arising from the single sector perspective. So we hope to revisit this policy. So with the time allocation, I go and run very quickly. This is in the ocean policy that we already have. At the end of the day, coastal tourism, renewable energy is part of the thing. So we just hope that by having to sustain and exploit or optimize the use of marine resources, we'll be able to meet the needs for the future generation. Okay, so we need to monetize this. As an economist, we will be considering this, the benefits of the marine coastal environment for different users. So let's do this in the aspect of blue economy that will be dealt by Prof. Mahendran. So I showed here the graph is academic science that been presented as part of the position paper on the blue economy. You see the fisheries and aquaculture is laggard, whereas this is our food security. So I just hope with the knowledge content that we have, we should actually increase both wise in terms of the percentage of the innovations and solutions that we should provide for the nation. And also on other issues on the Straits of Malacca in terms of the busy straits, and it's also affecting the fishing activities along the coast in the Straits of Malacca. It's a choke point, so we must realize that the conservation of biodiversity with respect to the different ecosystem, the stakeholders, the people, the livelihood. Under the CBD strategy of the national policy, Malaysia, Malaysia is committed to conserve its biological diversity. Okay, but again, on the conservation on land, 20%, but 10% for the marine areas by 2025. But at the global level, we are talking about 30 by 30. Yeah, 30% by 2030. So how do we manage that in the reflection of our performance from the initiated conservation policy from 1998? So again, the effort of marine life conservation for marine protected areas, as I showed here in the slide, should be commendable as we move with a different group of people. Just now we mentioned about partners, WWF. We also have Reach Check Malaysia also doing their part, and also the government agencies, the ministries. We just hope that we be able to have to populate this MyBiz of government with other portals that actually been established by other universities and other research institutions to look at what are the threats and the resources that we have and how are we going to optimize the users of it.
Sorry,
So,
Prof, two more minutes.
Okay, under the Coral Triangle Initiative, we had the Blue Economy, Rio, and then we had the action plan. We have the same targets, as you can see, under the biodiversity policy, the knowledge and science base for biodiversity. And then part of the important part is to improve the interface and communication between science and policy. Under the action 8.3 for the indicators and actions, we need to identify, map, and protect marine and ecological corridors. So this is one of the promotion that I hope to have more science studies related to marine conservation. But at the same time, under the project under MOSTI strategic research, I show here that for sustainable fisheries management, we have developed a prototype catamaran. For the fishing, we have the sustainable fisheries management. So that we have reduced by catch, which should be a model that was displayed at Lima recently. So under the ecosystem management, we show you under the initiative from the students, the graduate of our students getting together, working with the community. So this is bridging science and communities through ocean sustainability by EcoSweat. So this is in STU, Terengganu of STU Wetland School, actually encouraging young generation to be exposed and participation from the teenagers, the schools, the universities to participate in this course. We have the fishermen, actually crafters, sharing their knowledge, and they become wetland teachers. From the traditional and ecological knowledge, which is very useful in this context of ocean decade, we believe from the physical product, normally we come to have experiential product that actually can lead to the ecotourism for Malaysia, especially. So let's join hands for partnership in getting projects, ideas for mutual accountability for our resources, and making use of our effort for the ocean and environmental conservation with all parties. So we have all the players, the young people, for the marine scientists that we have done for the ocean decade, Yeah, especially for the women scientists. We celebrate World Ocean Day today also in Terengganu, and I'm sure all other universities are doing the same one. So with this portal, we hope to advocate more in terms of putting the oceans first and make sure that it is healthy. So in joining hands, we hope to have science and policy interface and governance to be improved by having integrating ocean science, empower scientists, researchers, and create, develop innovative collaborative network, accelerators project, and respond to the UN call for actions. So we hope to have a better decision making at the end of the day and the policy guidance. With that, I thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much indeed, Professor Dr. Noraini, for the very informative and encouraging presentation. We appreciate also you highlighting some of the, or I may say refreshing some of the policy priorities that we should have and should undertake to make sure that it's adopted at the government level and implemented effectively, such as the National Ocean Policy and so on. In your presentation, Dato, you've mentioned it is very, very crucial that we first understand the role of the ocean and what are the threats then on the survival of our oceans. As you mentioned, Malaysia is truly a maritime nation, but not many people probably really understand the context in that sense. Now, the critical time is now. I definitely agree with you, Dad, and I'll echo with what you've mentioned. Oceans are definitely our last frontiers, and we need to do more on making sure that we keep it safe for the generation to come. Now, you've spoken about a very complex environmental ecosystem, natural resources in that sense, but it's really interesting the way you've highlighted the point on blue ocean, the ocean decade, and how it cross-cuts international conservation agenda and blue economy agenda through not just ecosystem-based approaches, but also on priorities where we have to look into streamlining international priorities, regional agendas, as well as national actions to make sure that we achieve the aspirations under the, not just the IUCN decade, but also some of the other obligations that the nation have, such as the CBT Convention and other related conventions as well. So, Prof. Dato, I thank you once again for sharing the very informative highlights on some of the very pertinent areas. And I already see some questions coming in, but let's keep that for the end of the session. So please do stay with us. Thank you once again, Prof. We'll now move on to the next speaker. We have here for the session today, Professor Dwi Susanto, who is a research professor in oceanic sciences and environmental sciences at the University of Maryland. And the topic of the presentation would be the ocean and climate change in the tropics. Without further ado, I pass the floor to you.
Good afternoon. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. First, I would like to thank you, Professor Ismail, who invited me to give a talk in this seminar. It is my pleasure and honor to be here, even though it's not in person. Last time I visited Malaysia is in 2007 when Professor Noraini, who is also guest speaker in this talk, invited me to give seminar there. So my name Dwi Susanto from University of Maryland, located in Washington, D.C. Today I would like to give a talk in the title, The Ocean and Climate Change in the Tropics. As we can see that our country located in the Western Pacific, known as maritime continent, it is play important role in a global ocean circulation and climate. So in this talk, I would like to take a look at the 2 points of view, from the oceanic point of view and from the atmospheric point of view. From the ocean point of view, the trade wind in the Pacific pose the warm tropical Pacific sea surface temperature into the west. That's why our country is located within the Western Pacific warm pool. As consequences, that the sea level in the Western Pacific is higher compared to the Indian Ocean, so that way allow the water from the Western Pacific to the Indian Ocean known as Indonesian through flow. The second consequence is maritime continent is strongly affected by extreme climate event associated with the El Nino and La Nina. During the El Nino, the warm water that used to be in the Western Pacific warm pool moved to the east, and the sea surface height also decreased in that region, so that is less the through flow. And on the other hand, during the La Nina, the warm water is accumulated in the west, so that it will be more rainfall during the La Nina and then less rainfall during El Nino year. So here is the plain view of the sea surface temperature. During the La Nina is warm water in our region, so likely to become more flooding. And then during the El Nino, the warm water moved to the east, and our region is less sea surface temperature is cooler, so that less rainfall or most likely to have the likelihood of forest fire. Another extreme event is associated with the Indian Ocean dipole. Basically, is this temperature difference between the west and the east in this block, in the Western Indian Ocean and the Eastern Indian Ocean next to the Java Sumatra coast. And this is the index. So most of the time during the El Nino, also the Indian Ocean dipole positive. During the La Nina is dipole mode negative, but not always. Now, if we look at the through flow, the Indonesian through flow is part of the global conveyor belt like this. So the Pacific water enter the maritime canal, go to the Indian Ocean, and then go to the Atlantic, and then going south, and then going to the South Ocean, and then going back north to the Abel in the Pacific, and so on. So that is global conveyor belt. So the detail of the through flow is here, most of them through the Sulawesi, Makassar Strait, and then directly to the Lombok Strait into the Indian Ocean. But most of them going to the east, combined with the eastern pathway through the Liva Matola Halmahera, and then exit to the Ombe and Timor Passage. And then another through flow that's from the Luzon Strait, South China Sea to the Karimata, that's combined into the main through flow. But this through flow is strongly influenced by the monsoon. If you look at the oceanic and atmospheric point of view, okay, during the normal year, the maritime continent is the center of atmospheric convection. Okay. And then if you look at the sea level in the thermocline is deeper. Okay, because of warm water is moving here. And then during the El Nino, the warm water moved to the east, so the maritime continent is a center of divergence or not convergence, so that the groundwater level also lower than normal year. Conversely, during the La Nina, the stronger convection over the maritime continent, so more rainfall, most likely become flooding, so that the groundwater level is higher than normal year. So here, if we look at the record of this is insight to observation of the rainfall, daily rainfall in the Kalimantan or Borneo. The red is the rainfall, the blue is the groundwater level. You can see when the El Nino and dipole positive, the rainfall is less or none, and then the groundwater is going down, and then back up again when the rainfall exists. Now you can see this is different. For example, it's 2016 when the El Nino and dipole positive, you get a very strong decrease in terms of the groundwater level. So that way the rainfall in our region or groundwater can be used as a proxy of El Nino rather than waiting from the NOAA announcement. And then the bottom is the sea surface temperature of Java and Sumatra. Okay. So in conclusion, in terms of the ocean and climate dynamic of the maritime continent, okay, what happened in the Indo-Pacific maritime continent is its influence the Western region. That's why, because what happened in the continent not only stay here, but can be translated due to the worker circulation into the climate and weather in the North America and South America. That's why maritime continent play important role in global climate system and also host the strongest convections and then branch of the worker circulation affected by the monsoon and also interacting with the Indian Ocean dipole and so. And then one of the largest anthropogenic aerosol in our region, biomass burning, and then RC interaction and mixing that may feedback of the atmosphere. And then last but not least, is, our region is also one of the largest biodiversity in the land and the ocean in the world. Okay. Because of this, this seminar is about marine ecosystem. So I would like to relate the climate and extreme event with the chlorophyll concentration. Here is the plot of the condition during the El Nino and dipole positive, during La Nina and dipole negative in 1997-98 and also in 2019 and 2016. In principle, during the El Nino, the stronger chlorophyll along the Java, Sumatra, and also in the tip of Aceh and then tip of Vietnam. But during those El Nino year is less chlorophyll in the Malacca Strait and around the Kalimantan. But during the La Nina, it will be a stronger chlorophyll along the Kalimantan. Okay. And if we look at more in depth in the Malacca Strait, this is based on paper by Mandal et al. Our paper basically show that stronger chlorophyll during the northwest monsoon in December and February compared to the southeast monsoon in May to September due to Ikman transport. If we look at seasonal and interannual tidal mixing, it turned out that the tidal mixings occur in shallow and narrow strait rather than the open sea in the Banda Sea or South China Sea or the Indian Ocean and Pacific Ocean. So that the stronger mixings occur in the Sulu Shale along the Nusa Tenggara Island from Bali to Timor, south of Java, and then Johor Bahru, and then also in Malacca Strait. This is during the northwest monsoon, Malacca Strait is stronger compared to the southeast monsoon, as mentioned before. And then how about during the La Nina and El Nino year? It turned out during the El Nino is stronger in those regions, but in the South China Sea and Rio Island chain, that is stronger during the La Nina. How about the extreme event? Due to the warming climate, the extreme event amplitude and frequency is also increased. And this is the map of where the extreme event located. And now the hot topic is about marine heat wave. This is a symbol. So where marine heat wave located, mostly in the Japan Sea, south of Indonesia, Australia, and then in the Australia and also in the Pacific and Atlantic. So this is the map. So what is the marine heat wave? Marine heat wave is rare. Basically, is extreme high ocean temperature that persists days to months, that extend from kilometer to 100 kilometer and penetrate even deeper in the ocean. So this is hot topic right now. Okay? And the next one is I would like to you pay attention to this upcoming satellite. They call it PACE, Plankton, Aerosol, Cloud, and Ocean Ecosystem, because this is the next generation of the MODIS that measure the ocean chlorophyll. The key important of this is the repeat time is 2 days. And then also the key point, important point is multispectral, meaning multi-frequencies, so that we can distinguish between the chlorophyll in turbid water and the clear water. And then, so that way this is because of the turbidity or because of the chlorophyll. And in fact, the challenge that we would like to solve is if we can also distinguish between what kind of a plankton. So that way I would like to ask you pay attention of this, and inshallah I will be one of the NASA science team for this satellite, and they will be announced in this fall 2023, and the satellite will be launched in January 2024. And here is the detail of the satellite application, but because of the time, I will not explain it, but you can read it. So in summary, that the maritime continent is play important role in global ocean circulation and climate. And tidal mixing in Southeast Asia is located in the narrow strait like Sulusil, Ifamatula, and along the Sudas island chains, Malacca Strait, and then Johor Bahru. Okay, and then understanding the tidal mixing and is important for ocean climate variability in the Indian Ocean, in the Indian Ocean, because of the true flow. So whatever that from the Pacific and also maritime continent will be exited to the Indian Ocean, so that affect the Indian Ocean. And last but not least is that hot topic right now is marine heat wave and the impact in the biogeochemical and ecosystem. And then I would like to ask you to have a comprehensive detailed observation of plankton and marine ecosystem in the region, so that those data will be used for validation of the NASA incoming PACE satellite. And then also that we have the in situ observation rather rely on the Pacific and the Atlantic Ocean, but in our ocean. So the chlorophyll concentration derived from the satellite will be matched with the in situ observation. So first, I would like to thank you, for all of you for your attention, and all my presentation and paper can be downloaded from my website here. So thank you very much. Terima kasih. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi.
Thank you very much, Professor Dwi Susanto, for the very interesting presentation. Professor Dwi touched upon a very crucial element. We heard from the other speakers on the need for conservation, the cross-cutting issues, the policy and science nexus that are required for management and so on. But we cannot run away from first understanding climate change, which is, like we mentioned earlier in the opening, it's a cross-cutting common denominator that we have to take into consideration to be able to manage the oceans. He touched upon the La Nina and El Nino phenomena as well. And for us in Malaysia, I think we're already feeling some of these effects the last several weeks. And so he emphasized on the global ocean circulation and how it impacts the maritime Indo-Pacific continent. So with that, Professor Dwi, I think this is a very important topic, and it definitely relates back to all the other presenters as well. We'll keep the questions to the end of the session, and we'll quickly move on to our next speaker. May I introduce to you Professor Mahindran Sangharanai, who is from the He is a member of the National Science Council of Malaysia, and he will be speaking on a very important topic again. We're moving on to blue economy now, deriving return on value or ROV from the blue economy in the tropics. Prof, I pass the floor to you.
Thank you very much, Cheryl. Can you see my presentation?
Yes.
Okay, so let me put it on a presentation mode. Okay, first, good day to everyone, and happy Ocean Day. Let me take this opportunity to thank the organizers for this very important forum. We are, as a human species, we have a major impact on the global environmental system, this notion of Anthropocene. And I think it's timely that we looked at both our impact on climate and the oceans and the biodiversity. And I think it's very timely. All the global reports are showing that we are heading for a doomsday, scenario. And I think we need to start looking at things very, very carefully, because it's going to have an impact not just on the health, on the economy, and a whole range of other impact. My topic is on return on value. I'm sure all of you all are familiar with the term return on investment. I'm trained as a data scientist and an economist, so we are quite interested in understanding what the value of everything is. And today it's about the ocean. And I want to take you through the kind of trends that we are seeing. And I think some of my colleagues in the earlier presentation spoke about some of the trends. I'll touch on it, but then I will go into a little bit more deeper in terms of the impact from an economic and social perspective. So I'll talk about some of the potential of the oceans and also some of the challenges that we're experiencing. I'll talk about this new way of thinking, this value-based development. And in that context, how do we measure ROV? And I think when we learn to measure ROV as opposed to ROI, which tend to be a little bit more short-term, we see that we need to take into account the risks of all our activities and how do we incorporate that into all our business model. I'll briefly speak about the state of the Malaysian blue economy. We just, ASM, we worked on recently on the position paper on the blue economy. A lot of the things that I'm going to speak about is from that report. You can download that report. And what's the way forward? How to do the how. How do we move from the 30,000 feet to coming down to the ground and actually doing the changes that we are supposed to do? So I want to talk about the global trends. And before that, I want to talk about the blue economy. What is the blue economy all about? It's actually sustainable ocean economics, and it's about, balancing our economic development with the health of the ocean, because as some of my colleagues earlier mentioned, the health of the ocean has a knock-on effect on the health of people, the livelihood, and so on. And blue economy is about, harnessing the full potential of the ocean in a sustainable way, so that, we don't exploit ocean very, very quickly, and then don't have we use up the resources very quickly or pollute it. So basically, ocean economy is about sustainable development, using the ocean resources, using the best technology, innovation, so that we not only have economic benefit, there's societal benefit, there is environmental, rejuvenation, and also conserving the oceans and the resources for the future generation. So how do we take a more long-term perspective of the ocean? And I think, we spoke about, the last three presentations spoke about why the ocean is really important. And part of the blue economy is about fishery and aquaculture, which is really important, a source of protein for, many people around the world. Tourism in the tropics, tourism is really important for Malaysia, Indonesia, many ASEAN countries, and the ocean plays a major role. Maritime, marine, transport, renewable energy. I know Dr. Baka is going to speak about renewable energy, We also have our fossil fuels that come from the oceans, and many countries in ASEAN depend on the fossil fuels, though there's a big push towards decarbonization. But how do we do the energy transition from fossil fuels to renewable energy that is also coming from the ocean? We're also starting to see the emergence of new manufacturing, new type of technology that is coming in, which is blue tech, that is going to be an important source for medical and a whole host of other new industries that are coming on board. And it is based on the oceans that are there in the tropics. The next medicinal cure for cancer and many other diseases could come from the ocean itself. The other one is mangroves. I think one of the speakers mentioned about mangroves. Mangroves are really important as a carbon sink, but they also host a whole a biodiverse ecosystem that many species thrive, including a lot of our indigenous population that are highly dependent on this forest. And in many countries, these are also starting to disappear. Interestingly, from an economic perspective, we are starting to see the emergence of new markets, blue carbon market, where mangroves and salt marshes are going to be playing a key role. It's got it's 10 times more than carbon sink than the tropical rainforest. So we are starting to see that there are value and tremendous potential for these mangroves and ocean related plants. Coming back to some of the economics of the oceans, we're starting to see that the global ocean assets is close to 24 trillion, and we see that all the sectors, tourism has been 1.1 trillion, transport, high tech, manufacturing, as I mentioned earlier, increasingly that new blue tech, sector is emerging, shipping. So we see that many economies in this tropical area is highly dependent on the oceans, and how do we manage them really well? And we see that countries across the globe realize that oceans play a key role in the economies, the health and well-being, climate change, and many have formulated ocean policies. Of course, there are also geopolitical issues on the ocean. Pretty much most countries have some form of ocean policy or act in place. And I think Dato' Noraini mentioned that we have many things in draft, but we really don't have an ocean policy yet, you see. And this is really important that, these policies are crucial in terms of looking at the health and well-being of the ocean, livelihood, and so on. And we see that increasingly, without an ocean policy and, that is anchored on planetary health, many of the activities may not have a lot of gravitas in terms of managing the oceans really well. So moving forward, we see that, so 14 countries, this is a sample, Malaysia, we hope that, we'll have an ocean policy very soon. Now, some of the speakers mentioned about some of the challenges that the oceans face, overfishing, pollution. We see, in this part of the world, a lot of, industrial waste making its way to the rivers, to the ocean, plastic. And interestingly, new studies are showing that, we have microplastics in fish and we consume those fish, and that's starting to show up in, in the fetuses and so on. So we're starting to see that the Anthropocene, our impact is starting to come back and haunt us. Coral bleaching. The other aspect that, when we did the blue economy study is that we have a huge coastal community, but, we lack financing, we have, poor infrastructure. So we're not getting the full value from our ocean. And of course, sea levels are rising, and that's going to have a major impact on coastal communities. So how do we have climate, mitigation, adaptation policies in place so that our coastal communities are not adversely impacted? So we clearly see that there is a major shift that is happening, and of course we saw COVID, but COVID is just a symptom of a much more bigger problem of biodiversity collapse, and we're starting to see that in our oceans, in our land, and that's having an impact on climate change. Our earlier speaker mentioned about, some of the challenges of the oceans. Dynamics are changing. The heat is having an impact on the biodiversity. So we're starting to see the knock-on effect of our activities on, society and the broader community. So there's a great thinking about, we move from public health to global health to One Health, but now there's a major shift in terms of planetary health. If the planet is not healthy, our oceans are not going to be healthy. And that's going to impact people and the economies. And I think countries across the globe are starting to recognize that we've got to see things in a much more broader way. And ocean policies need to be aligned to the planetary health, best practices. And you'll see that coming through in many countries. And we hope that Malaysia will adopt something like this. So that brings us to this notion of how do we then look at the value of the oceans and the assets that we've been blessed with. And, the traditional economic model is more of a profit maximizing. You extract as much as, from the resources that you have and maximize your profit. And that's led us, into where we are, the crisis we have at the present moment. And there's a major shift in our thinking instead of looking at return on investment, let's look at return on value. Because if we are able to create value from our asset, then the investments will come in. So the ROI is a function of ROE. From a longer term perspective, we see that we're able to sustain that. So what does that mean? What does ROE means? It means that the value gained by all stakeholders as a result of using nature-centric development frameworks, technology, circular economic model, and developing sustainable value chain. All of it aligned to global environmental planetary health best practices. And this is increasingly going to be the chorus that whatever we do, we need to be able to anchor to planetary health best practices. What that means is that we spoke about ecosystems, and what does ecosystem actually mean? How do we define this? And, and we highlight that there are 8 pillars to an ecosystem. One is the infrastructure, both the physical infrastructure that we build, man-made infrastructure, but we also have natural infrastructure, which is our oceans and our rivers and, and our land. When we pollute land, the pollution ends up in the oceans too. So we need to ensure that how do we, make sure that our natural infrastructure is managed effectively. Infrastructure digitization is going to be critical in terms of managing, our assets. Talent, governance systems, incentives. What are the fiscal incentives? The other aspect is leadership. Do we have the leadership to drive this change, and empower people to do this? Partnerships are really important, and global best practices and standards. So we're starting to see this ecosystem. If we define this very clearly with clear metrics, then we are able to manage this really well. So we see that there's a thinking about an ecosystem framework with a symbiotic relationship between the ocean, the environment, and other stakeholders. But that requires a major shift in our mindset in terms of having a nature-centric development, which is linked to the 8R, which is respect, rethinking. Whatever we do, we need to anchor to this kind of framework, a mindset, and a very spiritual outlook in terms of, our strategy and development plans. And that leads to return on value. What does that mean? It means about generating the talent, the knowledge networks, wealth creation, societal development, and branding and positioning. And we see that, financing is really important, that philosophy drives the kind of finance principles that we need to build into our economic model, from protective right up to science and evidence-led frameworks into our financial systems. And here we give you a comprehensive kind of financial incentives and economic incentives that are crucial in this value-based development. And ADB has, a comprehensive, financial system to support, a more environmentally friendly economic model. And we show that with this framework, you're able to build dynamic capability, ability to, transform, absorb new knowledge, adapt, and be innovative. And that drives ROV. And we are starting to see increasingly countries and communities that are building this are able to build that ecosystem. And we can actually show that link between the ROVs. Each one of them have a knock-on effect that drives the blue economy ROV. And we see that the talent drives knowledge, networks, wealth, and so on. We see that knock-on effect clearly in many of our empirical work. So what's the state of Malaysia? We see that, in Malaysia, we are an ocean economy, but we see that we are significantly, underperforming in many of the fronts. And here again, some data that shows that, a lot of our production is still at the low value, low production, compared to many other countries. Here's again a chart that shows in terms of productivity of our ocean economy. We are 1/3 of what Thailand is. And this is a chart that you've seen that, our ocean economy sectors, many of them are huge, but they are laggards, and it's tied to, jobs and so on, and operating at a lower end of the value chain. And we did this study to show actually there are major weaknesses in our ecosystem, weaknesses in our infrastructure and a whole range of other things that we need to, look at gaps in the ecosystem. So what's the way forward? We really need to look at an impact model, and we start looking at technology is crucial. And we show how the 1010 is crucial in developing this. And here's an example of how the 1010 creates new frugal technology for the ocean economy, covering all the key sectors. And that's can only happen if we build an ecosystem approach in driving this change. So there are technologies out there. We need to be able to build that frugal technology within the ecosystem, and having the right financing to be able to support this value. So again, we see that that ecosystem with the mindset change and the resources can transform sectors into becoming more knowledge and technology intensive. So here we have actually done this application of this technology, frugal technologies for many sectors. And here's an example of how, if we did this for the ocean economy, it has a knock-on effect on aquaculture, marine, and also renewable energy. Here's an example. A lot of our poverty is in the coastal areas, and we see that many of them, do not, given that the level of economic development, many of them use practices that are not sustainable. One example is fish bombing, which is, stunning the fish to be able to capture them, but it's got major environmental impact on the ocean and the various other knock-on effect. So how do we apply this value-based approach using the best technology, the resources and ecosystem approach to drive a much more sustainable kind of development fishing communities, to create more sustainable but also high value-added jobs at a more productive sector? So we see that requires thinking through very carefully our economic models, our value-based, our financial models to be able to create that value. Here's an example that we mapped across the country, all our coastal communities, and kind of economic development that is taking place. And we visited many coastal communities. Many of them are underdeveloped, the infrastructure is not there. Hence, they're using practices that are not sustainable or unable to capture a better return on value.
Sorry, Prof, 2 minutes.
Yes, and we simulated this to show that if we applied the ecosystem approach, we can actually bloom all of those communities into more thriving communities to create better return on value, high value added tourism, smart fishing, to be able to harness the full potential of the ocean resources. But that requires research, development, innovation, economic development and commercialization. So looking at new business models and development. So in this study, we show how the coastal communities can move up the value chain, create better return on value for the communities there, for the environment, and for the economy. And we showed that if Malaysia is able to do that across all the communities, it could generate close to about cumulative of 1.4 trillion ringgit. That's about 350 billion USD. And at the present moment, it's only the ocean economy is contributing about 21.3%. if we did it right, it will move up to about 31.3 to 31.5% of the GDP, and the kind of jobs that it'll create is phenomenal. So again, we see that, we need to, and that's, this is harnessing the ocean and moving up the value chain to create better ROV for all stakeholders on the ground. But that requires ecosystem, the 10-10, and also the planetary health mindset. Here's an example that we show how the ROV can be created in terms of the high-end talent, new knowledge, new technologies, new industries that you can create by, a planetary, environmentally friendly ocean ecosystem, building knowledge networks, creating the $1.4 trillion ringgit economy, and lifting, the coastal communities out of poverty, and branding and positioning Malaysia as a leading player. So to summarize, what do we need? We need to have a national ocean policy that is aligned to the best practices. We need to develop our coastal communities, and lastly, with comprehensive financial incentives in place. To summarize, I just want to say that, we only have one Earth, and we don't inherit the Earth from our ancestors. We borrow it from our children. So if we, mess up the oceans, our children are going to pay the price. With that, thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed, Professor Mahindran, for the very comprehensive presentation on blue economy. We apologize to some of you esteemed speakers because of the broad topics you have and the very limited time that we've allocated to you to speak on these important issues and subject areas. But thank you for highlighting some of the crucial elements that we have to consider when we talk about blue economy. It's no longer just a buzzword. It is something that's very topical, especially in the tropics, with a lot of work now being undertaken to better understand blue economy, to better measure the contributions from the ocean sectors. What are the threats? What are the challenges? And essentially to support, like you mentioned, planetary health. One thing that I will mention here is, Professor Mahindran, if you cannot manage what you cannot measure. So that is crucial that we have all these figures, and congratulations to ASM for the policy paper that has set the tone on moving or driving forward blue economy blueprint that is going to be coming up soon at the national level. So thank you once again, Professor Mahindran, and please do stay on. We'll take questions at the end. We'll quickly now move on to the second last speaker that we have for the session today. Professor Edward Ellison is the Acting Director, Sustainable Aquatic Food Systems at the Worldfish. And the presentation title is going to be Nutritious Food from Tropical Oceans. I would encourage you to try to finish your presentation within 10 to 15 minutes. The floor is yours, Professor Edward.
Thank you. I don't know if you can see my slides. Yeah, okay.
Yes.
Thanks. I'm going to speak about nutritious food from tropical oceans. And I work for an organization called Worldfish, which has been going almost 50 years, and for half that time has been based in Penang, Malaysia. We don't work specifically in Malaysia. We work in low-income food deficit countries across the tropics. But Malaysia is our host, and increasingly we partner with Malaysian organizations to implement our mission, which is to end hunger and advance sustainable development by 2030 through science and innovation, to transform food, land, and water systems with aquatic foods for healthier people and planet. Take a look at our website, which the link is there. I won't say more about the work of our organization due to lack of time. So what's on the menu for today's talk? I'm going to say a little bit about the nutrition contribution of aquatic foods, the threats to aquatic food system sustainability. A lot has been said about that, so I'll skip that fairly quickly. And about making space for food production in the blue economy. We've heard a lot about the blue economy. It's taking up an increasing proportion of global ocean space, particularly in coastal waters. But there are many people, it's not the ocean is not an open space. There are many people using it already and have been using it for generations. traditional ocean economy is part of the blue economy too. And we'll also have a quick look at the kinds of policies that can support aquatic food's contribution to human health and indeed to planetary health. And finally, a brief look at oceanic food futures. And throughout this, I'm going to be drawing on the work of World Fish and partners, and quite specifically on sort of work that I've been involved in personally. And I'm going to also give a quick introduction to a conference that we're hosting in Penang next year, which is pertinent to much of what has been talked about today. Next slide, please. Aquatic foods are sometimes called superfoods. Now, you probably know that fish are rich in omega-3s. You might know that that fish are also, and other seafood is a rich source of vitamin B12. But you may not know that fish are also rich and vital sources of things like vitamin A, which is essential for childhood survival, preventing blindness, helps fight infections and promotes healthy growth. For zinc, also crucial for childhood survival, reducing stunting. Iron and calcium, well-known nutrients. You don't often associate calcium with fish, but for people who are lactose intolerant and don't have high calcium through eating, for example, green leafy vegetables, fish is an important source of calcium. So, you think of a fish when you see it, your ikan bilis or whatever, as a bundle of a rich bundle of nutrients, omega-3s, vitamin B12, and a whole set of minerals and vitamins as well. Next slide, please. The nutrition composition of fish is very, very different, of course, and so it matters what kind of fish you're consuming. There are also health implications of different kinds of fish. So, the advice is more complex than just eat more fish, but certainly increasing fish consumption would result in many cases in an improvement in global health. So fish contribute nutritionally through direct consumption. About a fifth of animal protein for 3.3 billion people comes from fish. And the micronutrient contributions of fish are very variable. If you're talking about omega-3s, 98% of omega-3s come from aquatic foods, and something like 85 or 90% of vitamin B12 comes from aquatic foods globally. Fisheries and aquaculture production is getting up to about 180 million tons per year at the moment. There's significant issues with wastage and loss in the value chain, but it still provides this range of tremendous benefits to society, both through direct consumption, through contributions to household income. Globally, there are 800 million people, that's including the people who work in the sector and associated downstream sectors, but also the dependent members of their households. So about 800 million people dependent on the aquatic food economy, and for livelihoods and as a partial or total household income. And this is also a sector of the economy. Fish exports globally are worth $164 billion a year. And so managing fisheries and aquaculture for development as part of the blue economy involves balancing these different uses, because the beneficiaries of economic growth, of household income, and of direct consumption will be different in each case. And so how you manage and balance between a sort of micro and macroeconomic and consumer orientated versus sort of producer orientated distribution of benefits is a sort of key equity and efficiency question for Malaysia and other tropical countries' blue economies. Sometimes the temptation is to go for using fish as an export commodity and trying to aim to align all economic sectors to earn as much foreign exchange as possible and drive macroeconomic growth and development through macroeconomic growth. But that sometimes comes at the cost of supporting the microeconomy, people's livelihoods and people's diets. Next slide, please. We've heard that climate change is an issue that affects the sustainability of production of food from oceans as well as land. And this analysis that we did a few years ago, we've done other ones since, shows that in the tropics, that's the area where the projected impacts of climate change on the contribution that fish make to human health is the greatest. The productive potential of the tropical oceans by 2050 will have gone down by up to 50% due to climatic factors, from ocean acidification to bleaching of reefs to ocean dead zones from deoxygenation and so on. And so this is also the area where the vast majority of those 800 fish-dependent people are, and the vast majority of fish consumers are, and also the highest dependence on fish and aquatic foods in the diets is in this area. And that's particularly the case in the region that Malaysia sits in, Southeast Asia, where traditionally maritime economies with a high orientation towards fish in the diet. So finding ways to address climate change, investing in climate smart aquaculture, for example, to combat the likely decline in in wild fisheries is something that we need to think about in blue economy planning. Next slide, please. As well as the sort of global stresses, locally, aquatic foods are caught up in this blue economy enthusiasm. There's this huge acceleration in ocean uses, and this results in the seaward side in pollution. There are land reclamation projects that affect coastal fisheries, offshore energy, sand and gravel mining, and the overall sum of these sort of pressures on the water and the fish side are diminishing biological productivity and reduced access to resources. But you've also got factors on land that affect where fisherfolk can live, how expensive it is to live in the coastal areas, and access to the foreshore to come and go from your fishing activities and to move fish from shore to market. Tourism takes over beaches, landing beaches, residential development and industrialization pushes fisherfolk out of mangrove forested coastal land, for example. The net result of these processes is a gradual privatization of access to the coast, which means that fisherfolk who depend on public access often lose out and get pushed out. And there's a loss of access to the resources. Next slide, please. When we develop this blue economy, and particularly in the context of the role that small-scale food producers play in the blue economy, not everyone is as enthusiastic about the blue economy as senior government officials tend to be, where governments see economic opportunity, sometimes fisherfolk see them getting pushed out of the ocean, squeezed out or marginalized. And you've probably heard the expression, a rising tide lifts all boats, as if you have economic growth, then everybody benefits. But there's a cartoon here that suggests that without rational economic management, sound economic management, and attention to distribution of benefits of the blue economy, the rising tide could result in increased corporate profits, but not affect the wages and benefits of ordinary citizens and smaller scale producers and other fishery sector actors in the blue economy. So there's a strong equity dimension to beware of. And this has been picked up by various NGOs. It's also a topic among fisherfolk organizations who, the cartoon at the bottom there shows people carving up the coastal blue economy cake and leaving the crumbs, and that's what's left for the fishing community once the energy sector, the tourism sector, and ports and shipping have taken their share. Next slide. So the overall message, next slide. The overall message is that a sustainable blue economy needs to take account of existing ocean users and particularly, set aside food production as an important part of the of that blue economy when these large plans for capital investment and expansion are being made. With regard to the kinds of policies that could support the ocean food production, there's two arenas that blue foods are kind of currently largely excluded or somewhat marginalized in. The first one is the overall food system. When we talk about food, we often think about rice and staple crops, and sometimes about the debates about the environmental consequences of increasing meat production. And sometimes aquatic foods are left out of this debate. So one of the things that we've been proposing in our work recently is bringing blue foods into the heart of the food system decision-making, make sure they're not forgotten. Recall that they're an important part of the protein and micronutrient food system. Protecting and developing the potential of blue foods, and that's managing the wider blue economy, recognizing people's rights of access, harnessing the great diversity of blue foods. It's not just about aquaculture or capture fisheries, it's about the blend of the two and all the different kind of species and scales of production. The small scale fishers have an important role in the distribution of food, just as the large scale producers have an important role in supplying major cities with affordable and nutritious food. And there's a message, and again an equity-focused one, to support the central role that small-scale actors play in the fisheries and aquaculture sector. Small-scale farmers are being squeezed out of much of agriculture. The same is happening in oceans, and they play valuable roles as environmental stewards, partners in conservation, knowledge holders, and many of the other functions that are being talked about by other speakers. So those are our central sort of policy messages. Next slide. The way that you develop the blue economy and the food sector varies, and it's not entirely predictable because we're not quite sure how the world is going to develop. So we use scenario analysis often to help have discussions with governments about which trajectories they might follow. And if you think of the future world economy, it could become or remain very globalized, or it could become increasingly regionalized. And particularly, we saw under COVID, for example, a relocalization of food systems. We see political blocs emerging in a sort of increasingly multipolar world. And so globalization may have reached its peak, and we may be moving towards a regionalized era. Similarly, we may be nearing the end of an era when we thought that just endless growth would lift everybody out of poverty. And we're starting to think about living within planetary boundaries and setting social floors with regards to the provision of basic services to all citizens, and thinking about curbing the rising inequities that we see. So that's donut economics versus endless growth or neoliberal kind of policies. And within that broad area, how food production develops, and in this case aquaculture develops, is going to be determined by those kinds of factors. And those are the kinds of discussions I think that a blue economy policy has to engage in when it's thinking about how to incorporate aquatic foods. Next slide, please. What we're certainly seeing is that the coastal seascape is going to change. This kind of intense use for aquaculture, I think this picture is taken in Korea, we're going to see increasingly, perhaps in part, we're already seeing sea cages along parts of Malaysia's coastline, and getting used to thinking of the sea as a spatialized and managed system and not just a wild wilderness, which is how we've often sort of thought of it in the past. Next slide, and I think it might be the last one. Looking to the future, well, we can't predict it, but we can shape it. And one of the ways that we shape it is through the kinds of knowledge exchanges that we're having here. And I just wanted to flag for you another such knowledge exchange, which is the International Institute of Fisheries Economics and Trade is coming to Penang, Malaysia, organized by World Fish and several Malaysian university partners next July. And so some of the world's leading fishery and aquaculture and trade economists will be here talking about how aquatic food systems fit into the blue economy. So the kinds of things that I've opened up in this presentation will be dealt with by 500 or more delegates in detail here in Penang next year. So please, if you're able to make it, look out for announcements shortly, and do join us in Penang next year. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Edward, for the very informative presentation. This is again a very crucial area when we talk about both climate change as well as blue economy. We tend to understand fisheries, especially as a traditional sector, while we talk about emerging sectors and new areas to explore in the blue economy context. Fisheries always known as a traditional sector where we need to now start giving it the emphasis that it requires, especially in the sense of how aquaculture is further, contributing to the food security and so on. So with that, we'll try to discuss this a bit further at the end. And thank you once again, Professor Edward, for that. We'll move to the last presenter. Last but not least, definitely, we have with us today Professor Dato Engineer Dr. Abu Jafar. He is the Vice President of the Academy of Sciences Malaysia, and he will be speaking specifically on harnessing energy from the ocean case of the tropics. Delighted to have you, Dato. I pass the floor to you.
Yes, thank you very much, Cheryl, and I'm very proud to see you in the chair. As far as I remember, this is the first time I see you chairing, so excellent. Thank you. And maybe I start by saying Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, Assalamu alaikum and good afternoon. Actually, I have a lot of slides, but I'm going to go through them very, very fast. I take it I have only 10 minutes, right? So you bear with me. And I take it this is a public awareness program as well as educational program. So before I start my presentation, I would like every participant here, you heard me before. If you already heard me before, you should have known the answers of my two questions. Every time I talk about the subject of energy, I would like to pose these two basic questions. My first question is, how many primary sources of energy and what are they? So quickly you put down on paper what will be your answer, and hopefully by the end of my presentation, you should get the right answer. And if any one of you got the right answer at the front, please let me know and text me you got the right answer. All right, so thanks to the organizers for having given me this topic, harnessing energy from the ocean in case of the tropics. So this is a subject that I've been looking at for a long time. Next slide, please. Okay, these people very familiar about this novel, Jules Verne, who can get energy from the sea. So next. I have to move very fast. Okay, these are what I plan to present, but I'm not sure how far I can go down. But I think one thing you note, the number 6 there, this topic is, I would like to propose the establishment of the Ocean Thermal Energy National Berhad, just like Petronas call it OTENAS. So that will be, I would say, my final recommendation. But let's go through the basic from 1 to 5, if I can get through. Next. Okay, this image gives you the idea about sources of energy, both primary and secondary sources. There are 6 primary sources of energy, 4 renewable and 2 non-renewable. Next slide. So these are the 6 primary sources of energy. The renewable ones: solar, gravitational, this relative movement of the Earth, the Moon, and the Sun; geothermal, this tectonics, oceanic plates going under the continents; and salinity gradient. If you Muslim, you would appreciate the verses 19 and 20 of Surah Ar-Rahman. And then, of course, we are very familiar with this, the remaining 2 non-renewable fossil fuels, and include here is methane hydrate. This is the frozen gas in the sediment in deep waters. So that's another source of energy, but non-renewable. And nuclear, of course, fission and fusion. Next. Right, this is my subject. I've been working on it the last 10 years, maybe longer. Is the ocean thermal energy conversion, what does it mean? Simply that we extract the heat from the upper layers of the body of tropical waters, and we convert this heat into electrical power energy. If nobody takes up this energy, we will convert into green hydrogen. So this is what this definition says. Next. Okay, this is the principle of protect what I was saying earlier. So we have warm seawater in the tropics, about 27, 29 degrees. So we pump this seawater through the heat exchangers here, we call it evaporator, where we also pump through ammonia liquid as a working fluid. This ammonia liquid, the moment it is exposed to warm water, it turns itself to gas. This gas will turn the ammonia turbine and generator will get the power. And if no takers of the power, we'll convert this power through electrolyzers to produce green hydrogen. Now the trick here is how to convert this gas back to liquid for us to keep circulating this liquid to extract the heat. So we need cold water from the bottom. You notice we need to go down, not really necessary to 4 degrees, to 7 degrees in the tropics, where the minimum temperature is 27. So the differential is 10, 20 degrees. So essentially, OTEC technology produced two sets of revenues. The first revenue, if not electricity, is the green hydrogen. And the second revenue is the kind of economic activities, spin-off industry that could generate by utilizing fully this 10-degree discharge of the condenser or tech plant. So this is, I would say, major revenue out of application of technology. You notice here is that this technology, this knowledge has been discovered by French scientist Jacques de Sanoble in 1881. But next. Okay, this another diagram to show on the left that you can go down to 7 degrees, where the depth is maybe on average throughout the tropics about 800 to 1000 can get go down the temperature where the temperature is about 7 degrees Celsius. Next. Okay, although this knowledge has been discovered in 1891, but this knowledge has been revealed to us about 1,440 years ago. If you look at the Surah An-Nur, verse 40, essentially what it says is the total darkness at sea, below, above which there's a current, above which there's a wave, above which is a cloud. And I think the last part of the phrase, this is something to do with the hidayah. The metaphor here is that if one were to stretch his hand through the upper layer of the water column, till you cannot see the light anymore. That creates the differential of temperature, the top and the bottom. And then we use this phenomenon, this feature, natural feature, to extract the heat. And of course, the hidayah here is even you are hafiz, but if light is not given to you by God, there shall be no light for you. So if you are hafiz, but if God doesn't give you the light, you never become a Muslim, although you are an hafiz. Right, next. Okay, this phenomenon of how the light from the sun goes through the water column, it converts itself into heat. So our tropical oceans, where the energy from the sun is stored, yeah, and the total potential at least 7 terawatt. Next. Okay, these are the different parts of the phrase. I won't go through it as I was saying earlier. You notice here, God says, Fauqihi Maujum twice, Fauqihi Maujum twice, because one is current, another one is wave. Next. Okay, this is how to see, imagine the image, the energy from the sun goes through the atmosphere, becomes the wind, that we get wind energy, it goes through the cloud, we get the rain, we get hydroelectric, goes through the hit the surface, we got the wave, and it goes further into the water column, we get the current, and then the light only penetrate up to a certain point. Then here you have the two bodies of water. One is warm, the other one is cold. So they have a temperature differential here. Next. Okay, I noticed in many presentations, especially in Malaysia, and the moment we say renewable energy, the images people use and put in their PowerPoint always wind and solar. But I think in the tropics, there's not much wind. I always argue, my friends, wind in the tropics is good enough for you and I to sit under a coconut tree and that's it. So in the tropics, what we have is ocean thermal energy, as shown here. So wind and wave more abundant in the temperate regions, but not in the tropics. So the subject for the tropics in terms of renewable energy, the most abundant form is in ocean, the heat stored in the ocean, the ocean thermal energy. Next. All right, there was a very famous scholar from Carnegie Mellon University way back in 1975 after the world got hit by the Arab oil embargo. He came up with a nice article. In the future, you could see the transition of economies from OPEC, oil and petroleum economic countries into OPEC. So you can see our region is also a major, we have major prospects, good prospect to really explore and develop this ocean thermal energy for our sustainable development. And here I share with you all the sites where the activities are taking place. Now we are working very hard to get the first investor to invest in the ocean thermal energy technology of Sabah and also part of Sarawak, especially of Baram. Next. All right, these are the existing technology that have been running in Kumijima since June 2013. They got 2 plants there, 250 kilowatt. And the other one in the next slide, in Hawaii, this Maka Engineering, this facility is about 210 kilowatt. And there are many parts of the world now, they're about to install or design 1 megawatt rocket plants. And there are many proposals now being developed they are quite ready to get off the waters, not off the ground, off the waters. And we are looking forward, even the first one off the waters in Malaysia. Next. Okay, this Hawaiian model. So as I was saying earlier, from OTEC technology, you get not only power and hydrogen, but also the high value marine culture, including the high value abalone, seaweeds. You know, it can even cool the temperate tropical soil to culture, grow temperate crops. So next slide. Next. Okay, these are the products. They can grow microalgae and also convert this microalgae into jet fuel. This company called Selena. And also you can see here they can extract lithium, but also after they extract the lithium, they can make full use of the deep sea water for the production of high value mineral water, which has been proven to be of value to health, to help reduce our obesity, blood pressure and cholesterol. So good news for Malaysians. Next. Okay, the Academy of Sciences identify 95 emerging technologies and 21 of them consider impactful emerging technology, and ocean thermal energy is one of them. Next. Okay, this is the facility that we are about to, the building is ready to be commissioned in PD at Aquas. Basically, this is the first time in the world. Essentially, we take 2 technologies, one open loop, the other one closed loop. The open loop now has been running in India since mid-90s. The closed loop, the one that I mentioned earlier, has been running in Kumijima, Japan since 2013, and also been running also in Hawaii. So what we're doing in Malaysia is the first since time to put the 2 cycles, open cycle as well as closed cycle together. And this is to prevent the biofouling because one of the expensive capital equipment is titanium. So we're going to use stainless steel, but in order to go for anti-biofouling, so we subject the seawater into vacuum. This is one way to reduce the we're also working on the nano working fluid so that we can extract the heat from shallower waters. So we are looking forward for the commissioning of this plant in PD by, I would say, by 31st July this year. Next. Next. Okay, there are many technologies in the world. I was saying, I don't think we can find the most impactful one, an emerging technology that could fulfill all the 17 SDGs. So here in the exercise I've taken to get the data from Komijima and Hawaii, and based on those data, I would argue that ocean thermal energy technology, conventional technology, is the only technology perhaps today I have yet to see other sources of energy could fulfill all the 17 SDGs. Next. Right, so now we want to relate how this deployment or technology will support the 3 pillars of Madani development program. Of course, one is inclusive and sustainable economic growth. This has been proven. And then institutional reforms, we're looking for reform. That's why I said we need to establish this ocean thermal energy national Berhad or TENAS. And then of course, the first SDG that we could fulfill is to reduce poverty and to reduce the income distribution, right? The inequity in this way, so that go for social justice. So I think this technology will support the 3 pillars of Madani development framework. Next. So now I can go through the economics of it. So I'm running out of time. So I think I would say that electricity generated from ocean thermal energy could match any tariff of any source of energy. So because there is simple reason, because we have multiple stream of revenues. So just go through quickly the rest of the slide. So I have 20 seconds left. So these are the products, the high value marine produce, right, including imibudo, right, the sea grapes. Next. These are all the various products that can be generated, and you notice hydrogen is going to be the major energy source, and you can look forward for the standalone distributed power systems. Right, next. Okay, this is to prove to you that OPEC is the most competitive source of energy. This comparison, you notice a certain gradient, the cost is lower, but this technology has yet to be developed. So I would encourage Malaysian scientists, engineers to start working on this salinity gradient. The one that I mentioned earlier, the source of knowledge is Surah Ar-Rahman verses 19 and 20. Next. Next. Okay, this is just a statistic to support why I would say ocean thermal energy, other than the salinity gradient, the most competitive of all, because something to do with the capacity factor. So we can get this ocean thermal energy throughout the day. And this model just to show that we can reduce the capital cost of OTEC plant by sharing the capital cost with other investment to generate incomes from other sources of revenue. Next. All right, so now I would argue that by investing in the OTEC, I think here is we have this COP26 pledge, reduction in carbon intensity by 45%. And I would argue that we were to invest 5 billion and in generating 625 mega OTEC, then this could be recovered in 5 years investment, and we can fulfill our pledge at COP26. So you don't have to worry about reducing other sources of emission. Just by investing in OTEC, we could fulfill our pledge. So I'm hoping that the Ministry of Natural Resources, Environment and Climate Change, so far in their Bureau report to UN Framework Convention, Climate Change Convention, they have yet to operate or to consider or even factor in the potential contribution of ocean thermal energy development in meeting our pledge. So, and 5 billion is, in a way, is, not that big compared to what we, burn elsewhere. Next. All right, these are the details of what I was saying earlier. This next slide. Yeah, the target I can pick up from this SEDA, my renewable energy report. And unfortunately, this report mentioned only energy equal to electricity, and that's it. They don't seem to recognize the other types of energy carriers, including hydrogen. And I think I use these numbers to argue the basis we need to invest 5 billion to generate capacity of 625. Next. Next. All right. Okay, these are the potential revenues can be generated. Next. I got 1 minute to go. All right. Okay, these are all the economics of this. One, the revenue from the deep sea water. In fact, if you were to charge only 1 cent US per liter of raw water, you can generate, almost 1 billion income per year. So this is a major source of revenue for this investment. Next. All right, this is carbon credits. Now, Dr. Chen from Bursa Malaysia could update me what is the value of carbon traded now in Malaysia. But according to IMF report, minimum value of carbon credit is about $50 US, and it could go up as high as $150 US. In Europe, they're already trading about almost 100 euro. So this is the one potential revenue we shouldn't overlook. Next. Right, this is the detail of that. All the investment can be recovered in less than 5 years. Next. Okay, ocean thermal energy has been identified as a major source of renewable energy in our current national energy policy. And UTM OTEC has been highlighted as one of the core stakeholders. There are 2 laws to govern the implementation of the OTEC technology. Next. Okay, these are the laws relevant to that. Next. And it is, this is our EEZ Act, in a way, is derived from this Part 5 or Exclusive Economic Zone or UN Convention on the Sea, where it says here the production of energy from the water. That's what we're talking about. Next. Okay, if the column is within 12 nautical miles, this law applicable. What you need only the approval of the Prime Minister. Next. Okay, institutional arrangement. This is what we can undertake at the moment in the absence of any agency responsible for ocean thermal energy development in Malaysia, and that's the reason why I proposed the formation of Ocean Thermal Energy National Berhad. Next. Okay, this is the proposal, and I would see our potential of OTEC in Malaysia 26,000 megawatts, and if we were to give 2,000 megawatt per developer, we can support at least 13 project developers. Next. Okay, this we use this vessel back in the 2006-2008. The reason why this way we discovered we do have the resource. Professor Datuk Noraini remember this. So next. Right, there's a temperature profile we discovered of the water Sabah Sarawak. Next. Okay, there's the areas where you can exploit this ocean thermal energy. 26,000, 20,000 of Sabah and 6,000 of Sarawak. Next.
Sorry, Dato', if you can.
Yes. Okay. Now that's the end of my presentation. Can you just change the slide towards the end? Okay. Okay. Up. I wanted to share with you that if we were to exploit this 26,000 megawatt, we could generate gross revenue per year 27 billion. Okay, that concludes my presentation. Thank you, Sharon. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you very much, Dato' Bakar, for the very informative presentation. I recall we've been at least in the beginning working together for a bit on this subject, and it's really encouraging to see that you've really expanded the subject to quite a detail there on ocean thermal energy. And you're right that while we talk about wind energy and wave energy, actually the opportunities are really in OTEC. If we look into it in the sense of policies required, the government support and the private sector involvement and so on. So congratulations for that, and very encouraging to see that you mentioned all the SDGs we can tick when we talk about ocean thermal energy. So that's really encouraging. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we come to the end of this session. We've heard from 6 presenters on a variety of subject areas concerning climate change as well as blue economy. We heard about conservation from WWF. We heard about policy priorities from Professor Dato' Nuraini, and then climate change phenomenon from Professor Dwi, blue economy, ROV, from Professor Mahindran, on the larger context of food security from Professor Edward, and finally, ocean thermal energy. I am also aware that there has been at least 13 questions from the participants that has been posted on the Q&A function on your screen. And thank you to all the panelists that has answered this live. So there are a couple of questions more that probably the relevant speakers might want to take up. If the organizers can allow us a couple of minutes, if I may pose a broader sense of question to allow a bit more discussion on the theme of our discussion today, may I ask the panelists, we have heard all these different areas from each of you, and we've heard about the priorities, the threats, and so on. At the same time, if you'd like to look at it from the sense of Malaysian context itself, we are always mentioning that Malaysia is a maritime nation, and how we should be implementing some of this international, conservation, blue economy, climate change agenda at the national level, in cooperation also with our regional, countries and so on. What the question is now really, do you think at this point of time, Malaysia has got what it requires to be a champion on blue economy, not just at the national level, but regional and international? What do you think are the factors to support these aspirations for Malaysia to champion effectively? While we discuss about blue economy, what is required by the nation to push this agenda forward effectively? Can I please open this question to the panels? Victor, you might want to go first in your sense of the context.
Thanks, Cheryl. I think it was already mentioned before as well by other speakers. There's a lot of factors involved, infrastructure-wise, fundings. But I believe one of the challenges is the level of awareness within sectors. And a lot of these smaller sectors, probably have low understanding in terms of what blue economy is and what is required of them. So I believe more attention needs to be provided, especially to the smaller industries that are important for blue economy. Thank you.
Thank you, Victor. I think you again touched on a very crucial point. We talk about awareness, understanding, and if I can pin that down a bit more in the context of the question I've posed to all of you, when we talk about climate change and when we talk about blue economy, I think you will tend to agree with me that the general public or the mass, communities out there, probably not many really understands, climate change, one. The other one is definitely now blue economy. We agree at the international level, we agree at the regional level, there's no one definition for blue economy. However, even considering that, we have attempted to better understand this concept and try to emulate that at the national level so that we can better, educate people and try to come up with more suitable policies and management plans. So again, what are some of these factors further to push this agenda? May I pose the question now to Dato' Nuraini, please?
In my opinion, issue about climate change and blue economy only a certain sector of the people understand or trying to be part of the ecosystem. But I think the public, even the scientific communities should be also aware on how to make use of their knowledge. So it's like bottom-up and top-down approach. I believe in what we are trying to do to push this blue economy for Malaysia. The awareness is only at the top level. But at the end of the day, we need the political will to look at the policy direction in terms of very clear, what if we don't have this? What are the guidance that we need? It has to come up from the bottom, I mean, from the voices of the people. So the industry players also need to come out in terms of to find new opportunities and new growth. So in the context of what has been proposed by Prof. Mahendran, I think the language, the communication that we escalate even to the policy makers, it has to be a different language in terms of the touch points, basically, as I pointed out just now, in terms of the food security, the livelihood, if that affects the economy and their livelihood on the way they survive, and that thing would be the plus point for the political masters to actually advocate for this. So it has to be working together and partnership in getting the leadership and to get the trust for the investors, to put in their time and funding to support the information and data that can really make informed decision making. I think that's what I think we should push for the moment, and we have to improve our governance. That's a reality. That's a reality. Thank you.
Cheryl, can I comment?
Yes, please.
From all the work that we've been doing in many industries, including the blue economy, as I said, the enablers, the one enabler that plays a key role is actually institutional stewardship and leadership. And if you see that, because in Malaysia, there's multi-level, you've got the federal government, you've got the state governments, you've got all the different levels, right? But if you've got institutional stewardship that, look, the ocean is really important, and it cuts across many jurisdictions, many ministries, and so on. And it has to come from the top. A classic example is you look at the EU, they say by 2030, you're not going to have fuel with hydrocarbon there. A major shift. Now, what happens is that all industries, every player, now even Malaysians who want to penetrate EU needs to think about how they're going to realign to this new reality, right? In the same way, I think in the Malaysian context, if you have institutional leadership and stewardship that say, look, we're going to, ensure that the blue economy is managed through all this various planetary health action plan, this is how we are going to mandate it, and we're going to put in support to do the transition, then you start seeing people taking it seriously. But unfortunately, the politicians only have 5-year term, and they want to maximize within the 5 years jobs and everything else, right? So, and this is what we are seeing, that, a classic example is if you see the rare earth discussion that's happening here. State governments are doing their own thing, federal government. So it's that collective action is not there. And industries are waiting for government. They are looking, industries will go where the incentives are, right? So, and this is where I think if you don't get the institutional leadership, you're not going to get the right partnerships and collaborations, and the type of investments that come in, the type of infrastructure development, and the full works, the ecosystem. So you need that orchestrator to play their role really well if we want to harness the blue economy in a more sustainable way. Otherwise, it's, I think it's going to be a challenge, So, I mean, that's my 2 cents of words here.
Very well put. It makes it even more, challenging, as you mentioned, Prof. Mahendran, that it is not one sector based. It requires an integrated approach which involves a lot more stakeholders, industry players, organizations, different platforms. And unless you try to bring all this together, There needs to be a top-down push, definitely. Also, in terms of awareness building and so on, as Professor Nuraini mentioned, bottom up as well. But like you mentioned, I totally agree with that. You need the drive to set a direction and then try to support that in the sense of achieving an effective outcome.
Yeah.
Perfect. Professor Edward, I would like to pose the same question to you. I'm assuming you've got a lot more experience dealing with this at different levels as well. What do you think are some of the factors that would support Malaysia's drive towards a sustainable blue economy, even in the context that you have spoken on?
Yeah, I mean, I think there are several favorable factors, and some of my fellow distinguished panelists have spoken to those. I agree on the institutional leadership, and I think Malaysia can play a global role if it sets itself up to do that. And I mean, I think about Indonesia has done this to an extent, and there are other small countries like Palau have taken a sort of global leadership role in ocean affairs, in representing ocean states in a way, maritime states. One of the tangible things that Indonesia did, as well as sort of draft, sort of global codes and lead the charge for putting oceans in various international policy instruments, was it established a Ministry of Marine Affairs and a Minister of Marine Affairs. So that's something, I guess, that Malaysia could look at in terms of elevating the political position. With regard specifically to food, I was interested to see that graph of the lagging and leading sectors, and to see aquaculture and fisheries regarded as kind of among the laggards. And I think it doesn't have to be that way. I mean, there's quite a lot of innovation even in small scale fisheries globally. There's direct market, community supported fisheries. There's a lot of electronic technology for sort of monitoring, for direct sales. Even before you've landed the fish, you can sell it, using e-money and electronic communications and things like that. So even a small, what you would consider to be an artisanal fishing operation can be very modern and very dynamic. And in aquaculture, I think Malaysia has a sort of nascent nature-based or a sort of green aquaculture potential. And there are several research projects starting actually with funding from the from Canada, from the International Development Research Center, to several Malaysian institutions and universities, and to WorldFish, looking at how more innovative, greener forms of aquaculture can be supported and developed in policy. So in 2 or 3 years' time, we'll have had that sort of in-depth look. I think that will perhaps help to shift that the aquaculture and fisheries sector along that innovation continuum to become a leader rather than a laggard. I think there are some leaders out there in these sectors already, and it's about finding them and enabling them and letting other people know what they're doing, because I think they are out there. Maybe there's a few in the audience. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Edward. Again, very well said. These are definitely some of the crucial elements or aspects that we have to consider and try to work towards. Professor Dato' Baka, are you still there? I do see some inputs from Dato' Baka in the chat. No, I think Dato' Baka probably left. No worries. So the other issue that has been touched upon quite thoroughly is climate change. And this is my last question before we end the session. When we talk about climate change, one of the common areas that is always mentioned is how do we build resilient, ecosystems, resources, how do we work towards resilient adaptation or mitigation and so on. And while we ask this question, we consider there are already laws in place in most of these areas. Like, you talk about fisheries, you talk about ecosystem, coastal areas, coral reefs, seagrass, mangroves, and so on. There are policies in place, there are legislation in place, there are also, institutional mechanism, yet the challenges are pretty obvious. And how do we move towards, in the agenda of the World Oceans Day itself, tides are changing. How do we move towards resilient based approach? This is a very big question, but I'd like to hear from your respective, experience and so on. What would be your 2 cents on this? We can go through the same sequence again. Maybe Victor, you want to go ahead first?
Yeah, sure, Cheryl. Yeah, good question. I think for us is to really climate smart conservation projects. I think we have to recognize that climate change is the common issues problem within all the target areas. So we have to be climate smart. There is tools available. I believe there is approach available that we can use on to how to adapt our projects to be more climate smart. And to address that, we really need to work together, and also to identify specific tools, various tools that we can use for. Thank you.
Thank you, Victor. Can I pose the question to Dr. Nuraini?
I would like to highlight on the potential threat of the sea level rise for the coastal region, for example, and how you actually interpret or how you prepare and adapt the coastal communities during this period. So I think the scientists, the researchers may be able to pull the efforts together and looking into the perspective of the potential inundation, the potential threats in the terms of the time. But at the same time, we see that in terms of the state level, at the state level or at the local level, development is still going on. So with this, we need the scientists to make aware and work closely together with these stakeholders to ensure that the science communication is in the right place. I mean, how to push together that to balance the conservation versus the development through data gathering. So again, we talk about research and observations and monitoring. We believe the voices from the scientists and be part of the community or the technical evaluators so that part of the decision making, they can actually portray the risk that we are having if we were to do development and the risk for having the habitat loss or something like that. So I believe the interest now, people working together on marine spatial planning for any development within the local level or state level, or even at the national level. The marine spatial planning has to be there in terms of looking into the future, but at the same time, balancing the needs of the development and also conservation of our marine life. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Nuraini. Prof. Mahendran, same question. When we talk about blue economy, climate change is something we cannot run away from. What is your take on this?
I think, if you look at the coastal communities, and I've visited many of the coastal communities, a lot of the ecosystem have been degraded. A lot of the mangroves have gone, and we're starting to see, of course, you've got shipping and a whole range of other economic activities that have taken up the space of, all these natural, mangroves and so on. And this is a major threat for the coastal communities. We have a project in Sarawak where we actually are using drone technology to monitor the mangroves, the health of the mangroves, and also the microbiome there, the crocodiles and so on, that gives that thriving. So we have technologies that can do that. Right? So we have to manage the existing mangrove forests and so on. But there are areas that it is already too late in the sense that it's all been wiped out. But this is where the regeneration is really important. Revitalization is really important, that we need to start building that resilience. You talk about resilience. Go back to, we've got great scientists that can actually start looking at how do we replant back mangroves to build back that resilience. There was a question earlier on tourism. Is there a tourism that would not harm? Well, we have a lot of coastal communities that have actually, overfishing and all kinds of things. Why don't we then, pay those fishermen to look after coral reefs and maintain the coral reefs and so on. And that can become a kind of a different form of tourism, but you reinvest it back to, manage those ecosystems, and very similar to what we did in the mining area. I mean, I'm in Bandar Sunway mining. There used to be 2 holes on the ground, but what was done 40 years ago was to plant trees and regenerate the whole ecosystem. And today it's a green, lush, 200,000 population living there. I think similar kind of regenerative. That's why if you see under the 8R, part of it is revitalization, regenerating, bringing back that local ecosystem back, the microbiome back within the ecosystem, and create the livelihood for the orang aslis and others, because when that changes, it impacts them. So, and having the local indigenous knowledge is very important. So we're doing this project in Sarawak, really exciting. And, the crocodiles have come back, the microbiome is coming back. And I think that's what we need to do. And some of the tourism proceeds could go there to support those initiatives.
Thank you, Professor Mahendran. Professor Edward, your topic is very interesting as well. You spoke about fisheries to an extent, and climate change is definitely one of the major challenges to, not so much on aquaculture, but if I may ask you on, food security in the sense of wild captures. What is your take on, resilience in that sense?
Yeah, I mean, I think, wild fisheries resilience can be increased if the pressure on the stocks are not so intense. I think, if there is, if the environment, I think, as Victor and Dr. Nora Eleni said before, I think if you have this balance between environmental conservation and resource use and development, that you increase the resilience of the ecosystem. If it's already under stresses from very heavy fishing and then a whole bunch of other things, then it's going to be less climate resilient. So if you can remove some of those stresses, then you build in a bit more climate resilience. But I think for capture fisheries, it's really important that we don't give up on the goals of reducing emissions and increasing carbon capture and storage. I think the mitigation part is really important as well as the adaptation. And I think a lot of what is being done and talked about in food systems now is how do we produce food with a lower environmental footprint, as well as building resilience into those food systems and making the food system adaptive. You also have to try and figure out how to lower the emissions of the food system. And I think aquatic foods, food from the ocean, has a role there, because you can produce food from the ocean, high quality, nutritious animal source foods at a lower environmental cost than terrestrial meats and agriculture. Now, as Malaysia gets wealthier, people's animal source food consumption is increasing, and a lot of that increase we're seeing is in, poultry and meat. Where seafood is an area that you could grow, I think, through sustainable aquaculture and judicious management of fisheries. And yeah, I mean, there are things that you can do to adapt aquaculture to future climate. You can project what the climate in Malaysia will be like, and then start thinking about breeding aquatic organisms that will grow in the conditions that you're going to see in 30, 40 years' time, rather than breeding them to grow optimally in the conditions that you have now. That would be sort of like climate smart, climate forward-looking strategy. So I think there's a number of things that you can do.
Excellent, Professor Edward. That's again very well put. You mentioned on the importance to reduce pressures or stresses on some of these ecosystems, so that climate resilient could become something that is more manageable and so on, and mitigation, etc. So yes, I think in the limited time that we have had in this session today, we've tried our best to scoop as much possible. Probably we just scratched the surface, but we have tried our best to try to talk about blue economy, conservation, as well as climate change and its threats and challenges that's posed. Hopefully the discussions, the presentations, as well as some of the questions and answers provided in your Q&A function has enlightened the participants, and I believe the discussion doesn't end today. It will continue at different platforms, at different meetings, and so on. With that, ladies and gentlemen, may I just quickly round up the session. I would like to express my heartfelt gratitude to all the distinguished panelists who has very kindly stayed over time today for sharing their valuable insights with all of us. I also like to take this opportunity to congratulate the organizers for their excellent support in organizing this important forum and discussion in conjunction with the celebration of the World Oceans Day 2023. Your expertise and dedication to marine life conservation are truly inspiring. Finally, I would like to encourage all participants to take action in their own lives, all of you, especially communities and beyond. Each one of us, I believe, can contribute to the conservation of marine life in the tropics by making sustainable choices, supporting conservation organizations, as well as raising awareness about the importance of the oceans. On behalf of the team, I want to thank each and every one of you for joining us today to celebrate World Oceans Day and to explore the vital topic of marine life conservation in the tropics. Together, we can make a difference and ensure a sustainable future for our oceans and the incredible biodiversity they hold. With that, thank you, ladies and gentlemen, and have a wonderful day. I would just now quickly pass the floor to the MC. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much, Ms. Cheryl, for the very interesting, insightful session. And I hope all the participants and the audience enjoyed it as well. Huge thanks to all speakers for joining us today. Thank you very much to the participants. Thank you very much for attending this webinar from all over the world, making this program a success. I would like to remind the audience that this webinar is a pre-conference event of the International Conference on Tropical Sciences, TropSc2024. We have more pre-conference webinars coming soon, so please join us next time. And if you would like to watch the recording of today's session, you can check out our YouTube channel. I posted it in the chat. So that's all from us today. Thank you and goodbye.